Hello, and my name is Ronald Griffin for Artificial Animation, and in this tutorial we'll be recreating the Southland introduction, which airs on US television. It airs on TNT. I've been watching this show since it came out, since it premiered, and I always sort of loved the introduction. It's very, very simple, but it just works. It just works. And I thought for this week's tutorial I could do something a bit more simple. Last week I did particular, which is sort of etching towards some more advanced stuff. But this week I'll keep it very, very simple. But even if you have used After Effects for a long time, hopefully there are a few things to pick up on in this tutorial. So let's quickly just take a look. So that was the Southland introduction we're going to be recreating now in After Effects. The original one I can't show because then YouTube will strangle me to death and take away everything nice that I own. So if you want to see the original Southland introduction, actually, can I say Southland? Is that trademarked? Let's hope I can. If you want to see it, just search it on YouTube and you will find it. So let's just hop into After Effects, and I got CS6 on now. Because I was having some issues with Element 3D. So here is the master composition, and as you can see, we've got 10. We've got 10 other compositions in here, and it's composited together here. So looking at this, some basic things that are going on. We got some text, we got a background, and they're moving. Or in this case, just Northland text is still, but in the other cases, the text is also moving. So what we've got going on here is we've got 10 different images. So if you want to take a look in the description right now, there should be a download link for you. And we got 10 different images plus a grunge texture. And what's important to note is you can use any image you want. It does not matter what image it is. And the only thing to keep in mind is how big it is in relation to how big your project is. So if you're rendering at 1280 by 720, you can get away with some pretty low res stuff. You can see most of the stuff I use is actually not very high res. There's only a couple that are high res, but they all work. They just work well enough because we're scaling already, and if this is for TV, then that really won't be noticeable anyway. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing you want to do is, of course, download the pack. Get familiar with the images. If you don't want to download the pack, go out, search grunge textures on the internet, search for stuff you want, like skyline, hammer, whatever you want. And then we're going to create a new composition. First of all, I'm just going to create a new project because I have this one opened here. So now we've got basically nothing. We go to composition, new composition. I'm going to call this master comp. And this is what's going to ultimately decide what we render in the end. So I want this to be 1080p. You can select the preset here. For example, this or this. These are both 1080p. This is full 1080p. But I will just be modifying this. So for the frame rate, I'm going to put 23.976. That's film. Most film uses 24 frames per second. And the duration. The Southland intro is exactly 30 seconds long, for good reason. You don't want to waste too much time. And we'll make a new folder. This is also going to be micromanaging a bit, so we'll call this comps. And I'm not usually organized, but when I am, it's usually when I do client work or in a tutorial. So comps and assets, we're going to need those two folders. On a serious note, it is good to be organized. It helps you find stuff a lot quicker. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all these 10 images. So I'm just holding control and selecting them all. And you can just import these by file import, but I'm just going to drag them in. So now we've got our 10 images in here. I'm going to move them into the assets folder. And I'm also going to grab my grunge texture and move that in there as well. Okay, so let's start with our first sort of portion. So each portion is going to be 3 seconds long. There will be 10 portions to fill our 30 seconds, obviously. So go to composition, new composition. We'll change the size or the duration, my bad, to 3 seconds and click OK. Now we've just got this comp 1 here, and we'll rename it by hitting enter or return, as some call it. We'll just call it spot 1. And we'll move that into comps. So now if we drop down comps, we've got spot 1 and master. Now let's get started. So I'm going to take the first image, and drag it in. And you can see we've already got a problem. We've got to scale it up to fill our black edges here. That's because the image is only 1024 by 768, so this needs to be fixed straight away. We're going to hit S on the keyboard with the layer selected. Scale it up till it fits. And now you can see that if we zoom in all the way, you can see that it's not as sharp as if it was smaller, but it still works, right? This is a vintage photo, so obviously you're not going to find high-res stuff, really high-res stuff of vintage photos anyway, because they just weren't capable of that back then. So the first thing we're going to do is animate this, and we're going to animate using the scale function. So what we want is we want it to start big and go to small. So if we scale it up just a bit further, and what we can do is we can take the pan behind tool, which is the anchor point tool. You can press Y on the keyboard or just select it up here. And we can look in the middle, and we got this point here that we can grab and move around. And what this does is, if you look right here when I'm scaling it, it scales to that point. But if I move this over here, you see it scales to the point. So I'm going to move this point just to that guy's head. I'll just move the composition down a bit. Okay, so we're going to hit the stopwatch for scale, and we're going to go to the end of the composition, and we're going to scale it down by around 20. So it was starting at 230, we're going to leave it around 208, and that looks good. So if we hit 0 on the numpad, you can see it's scaling. Maybe we want a bit faster, so we can go and just decrease the value a bit. And if you ever run into, you got some black edges, just move it up and make sure that it stays like that through the entire animation. Okay, so let's get that tint going. We're going to use the grunge texture just to enhance the sort of old look, just to recreate the Southland effect. So we'll take the grunge texture, we'll drop it into our composition here, and immediately we're going to have to scale this up as well. And we can make it a bit bigger since it's going to be scaling with the image. We'll just change the transfer mode to overlay, and that just overlays it. We can press T on the keyboard to bring up the opacity, and we can just drag that down. Okay, next step. Let's select our image, and we can go to Effect, Color Correction, and we'll add Hue and Saturation. We'll go to Effect, Color Correction again, and we will add some tint. And we can also add some curves, so Color Correction, Curves. Just put that above the tint. Okay, so with the Hue and Saturation, we want to check Colorize. And then we want to drag the colorize hue. Actually, we can switch this gradual for now by clicking the eye. And we can drag this, and then with the colorize saturation, we can turn that up. Just make it a bit brighter. Obviously, if you're working with a black and white image, it's not going to colorize it any, but it does affect it when we've got this on. So this is going to give our tint. We can also up the red channel, which has a very minimal effect. Right now it's just messing with their faces. And you can just play around with this until you sort of get the right dramatic look, or whatever you'd like. Okay, so that's looking okay. Now, one thing you can do is you can go to Effect, Noise and Grain, Add Grain, and you can set this to Final Output, and you can go into Color, check Monochrome, go Application, you can go Animation, and set the animation speed to 0. And that way you can adjust the size there and everything. That way you have some grain on the original image. I'm going to leave that off. But if you want to go for like a vintage film look, that can help a lot. And so let's get cracking with sort of linking up the layers and the text and everything. What we'll do is we'll take this grunge here and we'll just take the pick whip and drag it onto one. And that's going to basically link the two layers value-wise. So the scale of this original image is going to be affecting the overlay we have going on. So as you can see here, they're moving together. They look like one image. If we were to unlink this, you can see that if you look carefully here, these scratches are not moving with the original image. That's why you want to parent it. And there are a million ways to do this. You can pre-comp both of them, then animate the scale on the whole pre-comp instead. But this is just my way of doing it. I don't want to have too many comps within comps. I don't like that. It's good to have everything in one place so you can change it quickly. Because obviously if we're going to go into project and we're going to drag this spot 1 into our master composition and we've got our first 3 seconds, we've already got one comp within a comp. So if we double click on spot 1, here's that. And then if we had more pre-comps, it's a longer way to go. Of course, we could also animate spot 1 within here, but to keep it clean, this is the way I'm doing it. So now that we've got this set up, we want to add some text. The original Southland introduction has this text right here. You can see that the L and the A is blended together. We could go out and get a similar font. I won't be going into that really because I don't want to have to make people download fonts as well. We're going to stick with Arial. This is not Arial in this example, but it looks good enough. So we're just going to merge the L and the A, and you can see the sky in the background. It's a vintage photo and everything. You can get an idea of how it looks like. So actually, just by looking at that, we're going to go ahead and sort of adjust this some more. Okay. Now let's just get the text tool and write. We're gonna write Northland because we don't want to get sued. That's not fun. So once you've got that written out, you can press S on the keyboard on the layer, and that'll give you your scale properties. You can go down here, click Title Action Safe, and that brings up your Title Action Safe grid. So what they've done is they've merged the L and the A like I was talking about. So we can just take the text tool, select those two specific letters, and over here we've got this tool. We can just drag it down and we can merge the L and the A. So now we've got that merged, we're going to need to readjust it to center it. Also in the original they had some drop shadow going on. So we'll just go into the effects and presets, and if you just search for drop, you'll get drop shadow. You drag that onto the text, and there you go. If you click shadow only, we can see only the shadow, which will set the distance down. We'll just feather it slightly. And now that comes back on, you just want a soft shadow. And that defines it from the background, so if it doesn't stand out too much, you can always use a drop shadow. Turn the opacity up to 100. Okay, so that's good enough, and so now we've got the animated background and the Northland text in the middle. So in the original, it also fades on with a bit of a blur, but only the title fades on with the blur. The rest of the title sequence, it actually just fades on. So to mimic the blur, we're going to hit T on Northland. We're going to go to 8 frames. We're going to hit the stopwatch. Going to go to 16 frames. We're going to make a keyframe right here. That's that button. If we go back to 8 frames, we'll just set this value to 0. So it goes from 0 to 100. We're going to add an effect called box blur. So if we search for box blur, drag it onto Northland. And now if we keyframe this blur radius along with our opacity, so 0, we'll turn that up maybe around 40, and then we'll go to 16 frames, and we'll set it to 0. So now, if we RAM preview this, you can see it has blur while it comes on. This is actually too strong. The original didn't have this much blur, so I'll just set the starting value down to something like 18. And so there we have our first spot. Now, the basic idea here is that you can either duplicate spot 1 and make it spot 2, you know, and keep duplicating, or we can manually just adjust each of them, which is what I did. So we'll just go ahead and do that now. New composition, we'll call this spot 2. 3 seconds, hit OK. We'll take our second image, drag it in. I'm going to do this a bit quicker now so we get through it. Going to animate the scale, so we'll start out with a bigger scale, 125. Go to the end, take it down, around 104, 105. Now we've got the animation. We take the pan behind tool, take the anchor point. Make sure to select your layer, by the way, in order to get that anchor point. So there we go. Got some scale. We'll go into spot 1, copy this grunge texture, paste it here. And obviously this is way too much for this specific one, but we'll go ahead and parent it straight away. We'll just press T for opacity, turn it down a bit. And we've got that done. Now we need the effect. So if we click on 1 here and go to effect controls, we can copy hue and saturation, curves and tint. We just also, another thing you want to do is turn the tint down after you've applied it. That was a mistake I was doing earlier. Anyway, we're just going to copy that and put it on to our background. So copy paste, you simply select all of them and you paste them. Now we're gonna, like I said, adjust these manually. So I want this sort of to be very dramatic. I want to crush the image out. For the colorize, we want to make some adjustments, make it just seem more bronze. And the tint, you can play with that. Okie dokie. Looks good enough. And here we'll just skip because right now we don't want to be worrying about more text until we got all our spots done. So you get the gist of it. You go through and create all your spots, and you drag the image in. Just keep the tips I did in mind, as in using the pan behind tool. And basically that's all there is to it. You've got to go through 1 through 10. I'm not going to waste your time by going through all of them myself, but hopefully you understand how to do it. And I'll just cut now until we get to number 10, and then I'll explain how to add some text. Alright, so we've got 10 compositions now. We've got all of our spots ready to go, and we're just going to start adding some titles. So first, make sure to you know, choose which titles you want to add at which spot. I'm just going to add from spot 3. So once you've found out which comp to add the title to, you want to take the text tool, and we'll just write something like John Doe. Obviously, you'll want this to be the title of the person. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to have the scale with the image. So we'll just scale it up a bit to start off with. And then to do the sequence they did, we're going to take the pan behind tool again. We're going to select the anchor point. We're going to put it behind. So if we scale this now, you can see it scales forward, sort of at the camera, if we had one. Which we don't. We can't afford a camera, so we're just going to stick with the 2D setup. So stopwatch the scale, and we're going to go ahead and move forward till the end, and we'll scale it up. And you want to make sure to define the movement away from the original. So you want it a bit faster. When I say original, I mean the picture here. You don't want it to scale sort of with its counterparts, otherwise it wouldn't look like there's any motion involved. So with that in mind, scale is done. We need to animate the opacity. So hit T, stopwatch the opacity. At 0 frames, we move it to 0. At around 8 frames, we move it up to 100%. So now we've got it coming on, we've got it sliding out. So you want to repeat that process. I'll just go ahead and copy this, copy and paste it, and I can just change the text, move it over if I wanted to, and you can just change the anchor point as you see fit, and instantly you've got a different animation. So you just copy it, paste it up, and yeah, that's all there is to it. Once you've got the first animation done, you can be quite efficient about this. So once you're finished, you compile all of these into your master composition. So we're just going to go ahead and go over to the master comp. So we're in the master comp, and what we'll do is we'll take all of these spots. So we already put 1 in, but we'll grab spot 2 through 10 and we'll just drop them in. And we're going to use After Effects shortcuts for this. So first of all, we want to go to the ending of spot 1. So it ends at 3 seconds. And then we want number 2 to start. So if we just select number 2 and hit the hard bracket on our keyboard, which is just on the left of your enter key. It may be different if you have a different keyboard layout, but that should be it. And doing that brings, hitting either of those hard brackets, left or right hard bracket, brings the clip to that side of your timeline marker. So if we move forward yet again, we can just hit hard bracket, and you just select each one and you just hard bracket it into place, just like that. And then the last thing we're going to talk about after you've got this all set up is where to find some audio. You obviously want good audio for your introductions. And since you're looking at an introduction tutorial, it's more than likely that you're wondering, how do I get audio and how do I get the rights to it? Well, there's a very simple solution to all of that. It's called Audio Jungle. There are many sites like Audio Jungle. I just prefer Audio Jungle because they've got a lot of stuff and they've got a lot of cheap stuff. When you buy from Audio Jungle, you have the rights to it. You can use it commercially once. You can't resell it or anything like that, but you can use it commercially. So I suggest just going on the site, and you can find loads of different tracks here. You can find jazz, whatever you want, whatever floats your boat, and you can use it in your projects. So that's what I've done in the example. I've just taken something from Audio Jungle and slapped it in there. But as you can see, once all is said and done, we've got a pretty accurate recreation of Southland. If I wanted to, I could probably make it look a lot more like the real thing, but I'm pretty happy with this. It's pretty close, and so I hope you learned something. Just remember to adjust for each image. You really got to pay attention to the colors in each image, because copy and pasting just won't simply work. It needs adjusting. You need to adjust the curves, the tint, and the hue. So make sure you do that for each clip individually, and that way you'll get a nice result. So I hope you learned something. If you have any questions whatsoever, make sure to leave them in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, please do like it, and if you fancy seeing weekly tutorials, then you can go and subscribe to the channel. I'll be putting out tutorials every Monday. So until next time, my name is Ronald Griffin for Artificial Animation, and thank you for watching.